So, have you ever found yourself just staring at a food delivery app? Stomach's rumbling.
Oh, definitely.
And maybe an hour later, you're still scrolling through the same, like, 20 restaurants, and you just cannot make a choice.
Mm-hmm. Totally paralyzed.
Or maybe you've got this huge project looming, right? But instead of actually, doing it, you spend days building these spreadsheets that are so complex they could probably plot a mission to Mars, but you haven't written a single word of the actual project.
Right, yeah, that feeling. If that sounds familiar, you're likely stuck in something called analysis paralysis.
And it's important to say, this isn't laziness, right? That's what people often think.
Exactly. It's a really crucial distinction. This isn't about lacking motivation. It's a very particular kind of procrastination.
Okay.
Actually, if we connect this back to the whole idea of the procrastination paradox,
Yeah.
you see analysis paralysis as this like prime example of delaying tasks, not because of bad time management, but because we're trying to manage difficult emotions.
Ah, okay, so it's the feelings underneath.
Right. Specifically that overwhelming fear, the fear of making the wrong choice. It's that fear that freezes us.
That makes perfect sense.
Mm.
So in this deep dive, our mission really is to unpack why our brains hit this freeze button when there's just too much information.
Mm-hmm.
We want to explore the sort of hidden psychological drivers behind it. And, most importantly, give you some science-backed strategies to break that overthinking loop and actually start doing.
Okay, so let's dive in. Where did this whole idea of overthinking even come from? I mean, analysis paralysis sounds pretty modern, maybe like business jargon.
Yeah, Doug.
But the concept itself, it's basically as old as human consciousness. Think about Shakespeare's Hamlet.
Oh, right. To be or not to be.
Exactly. He's like the poster child for being paralyzed by thought. He's weighing every single angle, every consequence, until he's just completely incapable of taking action.
Oh, yeah.
It's this timeless human struggle, This idea that too much thinking can actually stop you in your tracks.
So if it's timeless, when did we start actually, putting a scientific name to it? Was there a key moment or a person who formalized this?
Absolutely. And this takes us to a really revolutionary idea back in the 1950s from Herbert Simon.
Herbert Simon.
Yeah, he was a Nobel Prize-winning economist and psychologist, and he basically looked at the classical economic idea of humans being these perfectly rational maximizers.
Right, the idea that we always hunt for the absolute best option possible.
Exactly. Simon challenged that. He said, look, that's just not how our brains actually work. It's not realistic.
Okay, so what was his alternative? How do our brains work then?
Well, Simon argued this whole maximizing thing was essentially impossible for us. He came up with this concept called bounded rationality.
Bounded rationality.
Yeah, meaning our minds have limits, right? Limited processing power. We simply cannot handle and compute all the information needed for a truly perfect decision. There's just too much data out there.
Okay, that makes sense. So if we can't maximize, what do we do instead?
He suggested we satisfice.
Satisfice. That's an interesting word.
Isn't it? It's a blend of satisfy and suffice. It means we look for an option that's basically just good enough.
Good enough, not perfect.
Right. And here's the key takeaway for you listening. The goal isn't perfection. It's progress. It's getting something done.
So embracing good enough isn't settling, it's actually being realistic about our brain's limits.
Precisely. Analysis paralysis is basically that internal fight, isn't it? It's your desire to find the absolute best, warring against the fact that your brain just can't process everything.
Like trying to run, I don't know, a massive data center on your smartphone.
Exactly like that. It just overloads. Which brings us nicely to how this cognitive freeze actually works inside your brain.
Okay, mechanics of it.
Yeah. Imagine your mind is like a high-performance computer. You open one or two programs, everything runs smooth.
So easy.
But what happens if you try to open, say, 50 browser tabs, run a video editor, a big game, and a massive spreadsheet all at once?
Uh-oh. System overload. Spinning wheel of death.
Exactly. The fan starts whirring, the cursor freezes. That's analysis paralysis happening at like a neurological level. Your brain is overloaded.
That computer analogy really helps visualize it. So when our brain's RAM gets swamped like that, what's actually breaking down? What creates this freeze?
Well, it's usually a mix of a few psychological factors hitting at once. First, there's just plain cognitive overload.
Okay.
Our working memory, that's like your brain's RAM, can only really hold about 7 pieces of information actively at one time. That's the classic finding anyway.
Only 7. Wow.
Yeah. So when you're faced with dozens of choices and each one has its own pros and cons and features and data points, your system just gets completely overwhelmed.
So it's not that you don't want to choose.
It's that you physically can't process all the info needed to make the choice confidently. Your brain just stalls out.
Okay, so volume is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But is there more to it, like deeper emotional stuff going on?
Oh, absolutely. That takes us straight to the fear of regret. I sometimes call it FOMO's evil twin.
FOMO's evil twin. I like that. Fear of missing out. But worse.
Kind of. The more options you have, the higher the chance feels that you'll regret whatever you do pick. Your brain starts playing that painful what-if game.
Yeah. What if the other restaurant had better tacos? Or what if that other job would have made me happier?
Exactly. And to avoid that potential future pain, that feeling of regret, your brain's emotional defense system kicks in and says, hey, safest option, do nothing.
Wow. So it's like a self-protection mechanism that backfires by keeping you stuck.
Precisely. And often tangled up with that is the tyranny of perfectionism.
Ah, perfectionism. I know that one.
Yeah, it's a big driver. The perfectionist truly believes there's only one perfect choice, and anything less is basically a failure.
Which turns every little decision into this high-stakes test.
Right, a test of their intelligence, their worth, everything. So the pressure gets immense. And suddenly, researching endlessly feels safer, maybe even more productive, than actually committing to a choice that might be imperfect.
So the research becomes the escape.
It does. And then there's one more piece from behavioral economics. Loss aversion.
Loss aversion. I think I've heard of this. We hate losing more than we like winning.
That's the gist. Humans feel the pain of a loss about twice as strongly as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. So think about decisions. When you choose one option.
You're effectively losing all the others.
Exactly. If you pick that vacation to Italy, your brain registers losing the potential trips to Japan, Greece, Costa Rica, wherever else was on the list.
And it feels like a real loss, even though you haven't actually lost anything tangible.
Right. Your brain interprets closing those other doors as a significant loss, so it hesitates. It wants to avoid that pain.
Okay, so overload, fear of regret, perfectionism, loss aversion. That's quite a cocktail happening in our heads.
It really is.
Now, this all sounds very compelling as theory, but, does it really play out like this in the real world? I think there's a famous study about jam.
Yes, the jam study. Classic. And quite delicious sounding. It perfectly illustrates this.
Tell us about it.
Okay, so back in 2000, psychologists Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper set up this tasting booth for gourmet jams in a fancy California supermarket.
Okay. Sounds nice.
In the first scenario, they put up this huge, dazzling display, 24 different kinds of jam.
Wow, 24 jams.
Yeah. And lots of people were drawn to it, right? More shoppers stopped by because, wow, look at all these choices.
Makes sense. Variety is attractive.
But when it came time to actually buy a jar, only a tiny 3% of those people actually made a purchase.
3% out of everyone who stopped. That's incredibly low.
Stunningly low. Okay, so then the second scenario, they offered a much smaller selection, just 6 different jams.
6, okay, much more manageable.
Fewer people stopped by the booth this time, which you might expect. But here's the kicker of those who did stop. An incredible 30% bought a jar.
30%.
Yeah.
Compared to 3, that's a tenfold increase.
Exactly. Such a stark difference. It feels counterintuitive, like you said, because we tend to think more choice is always better.
But the study clearly shows.
The lesson is crystal clear. While we think we want more choices, having too many options can actually paralyze us. It makes us far less likely to take action.
And we see this kind of gridlock everywhere now, don't we?
Oh, constantly.
That reminds me of standing in the coffee aisle at the supermarket for like 20 minutes trying to pick beans. It feels so silly, but that study explains exactly why.
Totally. Or think about streaming services. You spend maybe 45 minutes scrolling through Netflix, Hulu, Max, whatever.
Overwhelmed by literally thousands of movies and shows.
And what do you end up doing?
Giving up and rewatching an old episode of Friends or The Office that you've already seen 10 times.
Exactly. Because choosing feels too hard. Or think about young professionals.
Yeah.
So many get stuck for years in jobs they really dislike. Why? Because the sheer number of potential alternative careers and that fear of choosing the wrong one, it's just too daunting to even begin exploring.
The paralysis keeps them where they are.
Right. And my personal favorite, online shopping.
Oh boy. Tell me about it.
You're trying to buy, I don't know, headphones. You end up with 30 browser tabs open.
Comparing every single spec, reading hundreds of reviews.
Until your brain just feels like complete mush and you just close the browser and buy nothing.
Done that way too many times.
Yeah.
So, okay, if we want to actually break free from this, we need to tackle some of the myths surrounding it, right?
Absolutely. To overcome this, we got to separate fact from fiction. There are some really common misunderstandings about analysis paralysis.
Okay, let's bust myth number one. More information always leads to a better decision.
Right. That sounds logical, but the reality is there's a definite point of diminishing returns.
Okay, explain that.
Well, initial research is obviously crucial. You need some info. But after a certain point, getting more information doesn't actually add clarity. It just adds noise.
Noise, okay.
Yeah, it muddies the waters. Sometimes people talk about the information-action ratio. Too much info can actually make you less confident and paradoxically lead to a worse decision. Or, yeah, more often, no decision at all.
So it's not about having all the data. It's about having enough relevant data to feel confident enough to move. That's a key difference.
Exactly. Subtle but powerful.
Which leads nicely into myth number two. Analysis paralysis is basically the same thing as being thorough and diligent. Doing your homework.
Yeah, people try to frame it positively sometimes, but the reality is quite different. Diligence has a purpose, right? It has an endpoint, making a decision. Paralysis, on the other hand, it's a loop. It's a cycle you get stuck in. A diligent person gathers info to make a confident choice, and then they move on.
Okay.
Someone stuck in analysis paralysis, they gather information primarily to avoid making the choice. The goal secretly shifts.
From informing the choice to postponing the discomfort of actually committing.
You nailed it. It's about avoiding that uncomfortable feeling of commitment.
That's a really important insight. It's not about how much research, but the intention behind it. Okay, final one. Myth number three. This only really happens with the big, huge, life-altering decisions.
Right. People think it's just for like buying a house or changing careers. But the reality, as we saw with the JAM study,
In the Netflix example.
exactly, it strikes just as often, maybe even more often, with low-stakes, everyday choices.
And why is that particularly bad? Seems harmless enough.
Well, it's actually pretty draining because it uses up your finite daily supply of willpower and cognitive energy on trivial stuff.
Okay. Your decision-making battery gets run down on small things.
Precisely. Leaving you with less mental fuel for the things that genuinely matter. It's like using a supercomputer to calculate 2 plus 2. It's just not an efficient use of resources.
Okay, we've really journeyed through the why now, the overload, the fear, the perfectionism, these mental traps. So let's switch gears. Let's get practical. How do we escape this quicksand and actually get moving? What are the tools?
Right, let's arm you for the escape. Here are some practical, science-backed strategies for your toolkit. First one, embrace good enough. Become a satisficer.
Back to Herbert Simon.
Exactly. Remember his advice. Make that your golden rule. Give up the impossible quest for the mythical perfect choice.
Easier said than done sometimes, but okay.
Define your criteria for good enough before you even start looking.
Okay, set the benchmark first.
So, for example, if you're booking a hotel, decide beforehand, okay, I need a hotel under $200 a night. It must have free Wi-Fi, and it needs to be within a 15-minute walk of the conference center.
Got it. 3 clear criteria.
And the rule is, the very first option you find that meets all 3 of those criteria, that's the winner. Book it. Done. Don't look back. Don't keep searching just in case.
Ooh, that takes discipline.
Yeah.
But I can see how that cuts through the noise. It sets clear boundaries.
Exactly. Which leads to the next strategy. Set constraints and deadlines. Constraints are honestly your best friend when you're facing paralysis.
How so?
They limit the scope of the problem, which makes it feel less overwhelming, and they actually force a decision. So, for instance, limit your options.
Okay.
Instead of trying to research all 50 laptops on the market, which is impossible,
Yeah, crazy making.
decide you'll only compare, say, the top 3 models recommended by a trusted review site. Instantly, the problem shrinks.
That immediately feels more manageable. And deadlines.
Crucial. Limit your time. Use time boxing. Give yourself a decision budget.
A decision budget. I like that term.
Yeah. Say, okay, I will spend exactly 1 hour researching this holiday destination, and at the end of that hour, I will make a choice.
Yeah.
Then actually set a timer.
When it goes off.
You decide. You have to. It's about building that muscle, that habit of decisive action, even when it feels a bit uncomfortable.
Okay, that makes sense. Building the muscle. What's next?
This next one is, I think, a real game changer for how you look at decisions generally. It's the two-way door rule.
Two-way door. Sounds intriguing. Where's that from?
It's a mental model often credited to Jeff Bezos at Amazon. He suggests categorizing decisions into two types.
Okay.
Type 1 decisions are one-way doors. These are the big ones. They're largely irreversible, have major consequences. Think getting married, selling your company, having kids.
Right. Walk through that door, and it's very hard, maybe impossible, to go back.
Exactly. Those decisions deserve slow, careful thought and deliberation. Absolutely.
Okay, so what's type 2?
Type 2 decisions are two-way doors. These are reversible.
Hmm.
If you make the choice and it doesn't work out, you can basically walk back through the door and try something else pretty easily.
Ah, okay. Like what kind of decisions?
Most of them. Choosing a restaurant for dinner, picking a paint color for your living room, trying out a new piece of software, deciding which movie to watch.
So things where the consequences of being wrong are pretty low.
Exactly. And here's the crucial insight. Most decisions in life and work are actually type 2 two-way doors.
Really? Most?
Yeah, we tend to treat everything like a type 1 one-way door decision. We give small choices the weight and anxiety they just don't deserve.
So the advice is,
Don't give a type 2 decision the emotional burden of a type 1 if it's reversible. Make the choice quickly, confidently, and move on. If it's wrong, you can fix it later.
that's actually really freeing.
Yeah.
Realizing most choices aren't permanent failures waiting to happen. We waste so much energy on the reversible stuff.
We really do.
Yeah.
Okay, another strategy. When you are feeling truly stuck, paralyzed on a task, just take one tiny step.
One tiny step.
The best cure for paralysis is motion. Any motion. So if you're overwhelmed by a big report, you need to write.
Don't think about the whole massive thing.
Right. Identify the absolute smallest possible first action you can take, and then just do that one thing.
So not write the report.
No, it's open a new document and give it a title. That's it. Or it's not plan the entire European vacation. It's Google flights to Italy for 5 minutes.
Just break the inertia.
Exactly. It builds momentum. It proves to your brain that action is possible, that you can move forward. Even the tiniest little push can break that static friction.
I like that. Small wins build bigger wins.
Yeah.
Okay. What if you're genuinely stuck between two options that seem totally equal, especially for low-stakes things?
Right, like which movie to watch tonight or which of two similar restaurants to order from. They both look good. You can't decide.
Yeah, the agony.
Sometimes, honestly. Just flip a coin.
Flip a coin.
Seriously. But the point isn't really about leaving it to fate. The magic often happens while the coin is still in the air.
How so?
As it's spinning, you'll often realize you're kind of hoping for one outcome over the other.
So the coin flip itself reveals your hidden preference.
Often, yes. It cuts through the overthinking and shows you what you slightly wanted anyway. But even if it doesn't, it just breaks the deadlock. It forces a choice and lets you move on from a trivial decision. It breaks the inertia.
That's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot.
We have.
We started this deep dive thinking about that frustration, right? The endless scrolling, the complex spreadsheets leading nowhere, that modern symptom of this really old human struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And now, hopefully, you listening understand that this freeze, this analysis paralysis, it's not some character flaw.
Mm-hmm.
It's not you being lazy or indecisive inherently.
Right. It's a predictable brain response. It's what happens with cognitive overload. And it's fueled by those deep fears, fear of regret, fear of not being perfect.
And it ties back perfectly to the procrastination paradox, doesn't it? It shows how we delay things, not because we can't manage time, but to avoid those uncomfortable emotions tied to making a choice and committing.
Exactly. It's like a self-preservation instinct that kind of ironically prevents us from actually preserving our progress and moving forward.
But the good news is, you are no longer powerless when you face that wall of options. You've now got this new toolkit.
Yeah, you do.
You can embrace the liberation of good enough. You can set constraints and deadlines that actually empower you, not restrict you.
You can learn to spot the difference between a one-way door and a two-way door and stop treating every choice like it's life or death.
And you know how to kickstart momentum with just one single tiny step.
Yeah.
Or even flip a coin.
Right. So the next time you feel that icy grip of indecision starting to creep in, remember the JAM study. Remember that more isn't always better.
Clarity, commitment, and action. Those are the things that actually move us forward.
Thinking is powerful, absolutely. But ultimately, action is what writes your story. Maybe it's time to turn the page.